so much. So I just want to start by saying it's really a pleasure to be here tonight from Southampton, and yeah, let's get started. So something that people don't usually think about is, when did synthetic speech really get invented? Was it when Siri came out? Was it when Alexa came out? Or was it long ago? It was actually 1939, and it came out of Bell Labs with this voder, which I'd like to play a video demonstrating what the first speech synthesis system was like in 1939. If it will play. Oh, it worked earlier. Okay, so we will skip the video. Sorry about that. Maybe the other videos will work, or we can look at them after the talk. So 1939 at the World's Fair, that's when the first speech synthesis came out, and it's a really interesting type of speech synthesis because this person is playing what looks like an organ, and as they move the keys, different sounds are generated that sort of sound a bit like a person saying words. And with this voder, you can even control how the voice sounds to make a question or to make a statement. Then in 1961, IBM rolled out this shoebox, which is a speech recognition system. Now, speech recognition is something I hope most of us have heard of before. That is the kind of recognition that happens with Siri and Alexa, where you speak to it and it recognizes your voice, whereas synthesis is where it speaks back to you using a synthetic voice or a created voice. And nowadays, we have all kinds of technology available to us. So I do a lot of calls on Zoom. That's where my voice is picked up by the microphone. It's transferred through the internet in cyberspace and reaches people I talk to on the other end. We also have really small gadgets like smartwatches and earbuds. And believe it or not, some of these gadgets are very, very powerful and then have these capabilities to record your speech, listen to your speech, monitor your health, and all sorts of interesting and controversial things. And then there's this emerging field of virtual reality or augmented reality, which I'll say a little bit about later. So this is a roadmap of my journey to here tonight. It goes clockwise. So starting at the top, I come from Oregon in the USA, and I started a bachelor's degree and left, and that was in engineering physics because I wanted to do other things. Engineering physics is more like robotics, so building robots. I really thought that was going to be my life's work, was to build robots that do tasks. But as I started that, I found out actually I'm more interested in like the software, like the intelligence behind decision making and information processing. So I switched that around and went to a different university where I studied linguistics and computer science. From there, I did a master's in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown University. And after I graduated, I moved to Singapore, where I worked for I2R, Institute for Infocom Research, and worked on speech-to-speech simultaneous translation. Now, this was in 2012, so this, I guess, in terms of technology, this was a while ago, 11 years ago, 12 years ago now. And back then, the goal, which I think still probably is the goal, it's a really difficult problem, was to simultaneously translate as I speak. So rather than I speak and then I wait, and then it translates, and then I speak again, it would start translating mid-sentence. So we were looking for how to do that in the most natural way by finding pauses where that could happen. Then I went to MIT, not as a student, but as a staff member, and I worked as a contractor for the Department of Defense in the US, looking at all kinds of different problems, and I got to expand my horizons. I did some work for the Defense Language Institute, for example, to automatically rate the reading level of text that could be then used as training materials for teaching people how to speak a foreign language. While I was there, I was inspired to transfer all of my efforts into the audio domain. And in order to do that, I really needed to come up to speed on a few technologies. One, signal processing, which I had never done before, and also deep learning with neural networks, which I also had never done before. So I thought the best way to approach this was to just go for a PhD and learn those things during my PhD, which I did. And I went to University of Edinburgh for 4 years. I did a master's followed by a PhD and a Center for Doctoral Training, and came up to speed on those topics. And during that time, I did a year abroad in Japan, which was funny because I did a study abroad while studying abroad, which was fantastic. And I was at the National Institute for Informatics. And there I was exposed to another sort of area of speech and audio processing that I hadn't really thought of before, which is security and privacy. And a lot of the team members that I worked with in Japan are world experts on this topic. So I feel like a bit of an imposter standing in front of you talking about this stuff as if I'm some kind of expert, which I guess I'm some kind of expert. And after all of that, I came to Southampton to work in electronics and computer science, which is a very fantastic department with the best colleagues. And I started as a postdoc. That only lasted for a year because I got promoted, and now I'm an assistant professor there. So I already gave myself intro, but I'm also the chair of an international special interest group called Security and Privacy in Speech Communication, and that's an academic special interest group. This sort of mind map that you're looking at is how I see the whole world. So basically, there's everything, and then speech is in the middle. And what I mean by that is that speech technology overlaps with so many different disciplines, from obviously linguistics and language to physics and how sound travels and things like that. Medicine, how we teach language learning, so pedagogy. And yeah, that is the viewpoint with which I come to you with this talk. So this talk, here's a brief outline. We'll talk about what is sound and what is voice, what are audio deepfakes, and then of course the pros and cons of this technology. So first, what is sound and voice? So some of you probably know this better than I do, so I'll do my best here. Sound is a pattern of waves that travel through a medium. And in this case, with my speech, it's traveling through the air because we're not underwater, but sound can, of course, travel in other mediums like water. All sound waves have an amplitude and a wavelength, and the sound waves are these compressions in some areas of the wave and expanded areas in others. So it's just a pattern of compressions and expansions, and those patterns are picked up by the ear. So what is the human voice? The human voice is usually talked about in terms of this model called a source filter model. The source is the vocal folds and the air coming up from our lungs, and the filter is actually our nasal cavity and our oral cavity. So all of that air has to go through our unique filter, and it's known that the oral cavity for me and my nasal cavity, all of that is unique to me. It identifies me, and all of yours is unique to you and can identify you. So if we took a picture of sound, so right now we can't really see sound, it's out there in the air as I speak. But if we were to take a picture of that, we can look at it in the frequency domain as a spectrogram, or the time domain as a waveform. And this particular picture is the sound of my voice. Let's see if this will play.
My voice is my password.
Okay, so that's a picture of me saying my voice is my password. Well, so we talked about what is sound and what is the human voice, but what kind of information is in the voice, in this signal that we can look at as a spectrogram or a waveform? So there's actually a lot of different information in the speech signal. This is as much a theoretical problem as it is a very applied problem. And the theoretical meets the applied, where we try to separate information in the signal, because a lot of it's just kind of entangled together. In fact, that was what my PhD was about in Edinburgh, was how do you disentangle all of the information, not all of it, but any of it, in the speech signal. So it contains things like our identity, so not just how I speak, which I have an accent, so I can probably be identified by that, but, and then not just the words that I say, but actually if you take the signal and you analyze it right now from a recording of my voice, I think we're recording right now. If you take a recording of my voice, you can do some special analysis, and you can identify me by my vocal tract and nasal cavity. You can extract that from the signal. You can also get my speaking style, emotion. You can automatically detect with a computer science or AI program that I'm female, and even guess my age with great accuracy. You could probably also guess my weight. So the vocal passage does change as someone, say, gains or loses. And also lung capacity, and that correlates highly with a person's stature, their height, their weight, and things like that. So there's a lot of information here, and I've just, every time I give a talk and it's recorded, I just think, oh, okay, all my information's out there now for everybody. You can figure out what medical condition I have. So what are audio deepfakes? So audio deepfakes are based on this idea that we create a voice print, which is like a fingerprint. In the marketing world, so when you hear a company, I don't want to name names, but I could if you'd like me to. When people market voice prints, they call it the DNA of your voice, and that is just scientifically not how that works, okay? But a voice print is, the term voice print is analogous to a fingerprint or an iris, because it's capturing something that's unique about you. And the way voice prints are made is that you take the original voice of someone, ideally a live recording of someone, or live speech, and you compress it through an AI technique called a deep neural network, and you compress it down a whole lot. So I've shown this as a funnel, and it actually is quite like a funnel, to be honest. And as it gets compressed, the output of that is a numerical array in the end. So you take all that rich information in the audio signal, in the speech signal, you compress it down, and out comes a single list of numbers, and that is your voice print. This has been fine-tuned and developed for decades. So this was not invented yesterday. This has a whole history behind it, really interesting history. In fact, some of the people that I worked down the hall from when I was at MIT helped create this technology. This was before I knew anything about it, so I never knew what they were talking about, but now I know what they were talking about. So there's two ways you can use a voice print that I think industry and companies are interested in. One is a verification. So verification in biometrics is a yes or no question. Is this person who they say they are, yes or no? Identification is a different question. Who is this person among a whole population of people? So what we do with those voice prints, if we want to create some deepfakes, I'll show you 3 different kinds of deepfakes here. The first one is called replay. And replay is very similar to liveness. So people usually talk about this problem as a liveness detection problem. Is when I listen to some speech, is that from a live recording, which kind of doesn't make sense. It's like a circular argument. Clearly, if I listen to a recording, it's not live. But was it originally live, or was it recorded and then re-recorded and then re-recorded again, and how many times? So that's where the liveness comes in. And yeah, this is a very easy kind of attack to carry out. So any of us could do it. I could record anyone, say with my iPhone here, and play it back. And when I play it back, I could essentially spoof you. I guess I could create a deepfake of you that way. But it's also really challenging to detect these. So I'm going to play a few samples here, and I would like you to listen carefully, and then I'm going to ask you which one do you think is the live speech, and which ones are this played back speech. So it's been recorded, and then recorded again, and then played back.
They are the innocent victims.
Okay, that's the first one.
They are the innocent victims.
That's the second.
It's so special.
The third and the last one here.
At the time, he was a living legend.
I don't know. What do you think? Who thinks it was the first one is the live speaker? The person who's alive on the other end? One person. The second one? A few more. Okay. How about the third? One in the back. And the fourth? A lot of people. Okay, yeah. No, so you are wrong. Most of you are wrong. It's really difficult for us with our own ears to detect this, and it's also really, really difficult to use AI algorithms that can automatically detect this, even when our algorithms have access to all that rich signal processing information and can do fine analyses of the spectrogram or the waveform. This is a really hard problem. The first one, yeah, that sounds like they're in a small room. Yeah, I'll play it again.
They are the innocent victims.
That's real. Yeah, the rest of them have been modified. Oh, sorry. The rest of them have been modified with what's called a room impulse response. So we basically take the first one here
They are the innocent victims.
and simulate them being in a different room.
They are the innocent victims.
So it's clear, yeah. So it actually helped the intelligibility, but it is in fact fake. Yeah. Yeah. Now the original speech was real, but the simulation of it being played back is not real. Yeah. No, go ahead.
It's only fake if you claim that it's as live from the recording, it's as live as the previous one.
Yes.
As long as you don't claim it's the original.
Right. Right. Yeah, and earlier before this talk, we were having a conversation about what happens if you're on the phone and someone says, "Can you hear me?" I do this all the time. Yes, I can hear you. Now, if someone was recording that conversation and they have now a recording of me saying yes, they could take that yes, which is in fact me saying those words, if that's not fake, but they could take that and they could splice it into some other conversation where it says something like, "Do you agree to the terms and conditions of this contract?" Yes. Now, if you can't detect where the real audio begins and ends, now you have a really serious situation. It's important to be able to detect those kinds of splices, but that's a splice example. There's other ways this can be used where splicing isn't involved. So what's the next one? Voice conversion. So voice conversion takes the voice of one person and then just transforms it into the voice of another person. So this one is tricky again because the words are real, the words were said, but we're just changing some of the finer characteristics using that source filter model to make it sound like those words were said with someone else's vocal tract and nasal cavity. And that's done, with signal processing. And in this case, neural vocoders. So neural vocoders are a type of neural network that's really came popular in 2016 when Google released this thing called WaveNet, transformed my whole field. That was partly why I left MIT to study this stuff. So it was exciting. So neural vocoders will apply a voice print, which again is just one of those numerical arrays. If you already have a voice print, then you can do this. And they apply that voice print to a target speaker while keeping the content of the source speech. And in order to make a voice print, I guess I didn't say this earlier, in order to make a voice print, let's do a poll. How much speech does someone need to make a voice print of you? How many people think 10 minutes of speech? And I could make a voice print of your speech. How about 3 minutes? Yeah, three whole minutes, okay. What about 1 minute? Okay, a lot of people. Anyone want to go lower than a minute? A lot of people? Okay, how about 3 to 5 seconds? Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, 3 to 5 seconds. So you have plenty of speech to make my voice print and deep fake me now. And I've thought about this a lot as I give more and more public talks or give online seminars or webinars. I think, well, there it goes, I'm out there. And my defense is, if someone ever says, I have an audio recording of Jennifer Williams saying this, you don't, okay? That's my defense. It's all fake. So 3 to 5 seconds is all you need to create this voice print. Once you have a voice print, you can then make speech sound like another person. Now, I should be careful to say this doesn't involve capturing the nuances of speaking style. So maybe I have a particular style of how I enunciate or don't enunciate certain words, how my prosody rises and falls. This doesn't capture that at all. This is just modeling the identity of me, so it can sound like me, maybe speaking oddly. So let's listen to some examples of voice conversion here.
The question as to why it was left out has not been answered to date.
Okay, that's our source speaker. We're going to take that source speaker and transform him into a few others.
The question as to why it was left out has not been answered to date. The question as to why it was left out has not been answered to date. The question as to why it was left out has not been answered to date.
So those sound kind of okay. I mean, they don't sound like things used to sound with, I don't know, I think of maybe Stephen Hawking's speech synthesis system, which is quite mechanical. He chose not to upgrade the technology for his voice because people, when they hear that sound of his voice, they associate that with his identity. That's part of his personality, basically. He adopted that. So even though he had an opportunity, years ago, he never did that. But yeah, these are much newer sounding, I guess, and it's because of these neural vocoders that make it sound so realistic. Okay, so another type of deepfake. This is called a text-to-speech synthesis. This is where you take text and you just make the computer talk, essentially, and make it sound so easy. This is a really, really difficult thing to do because you're taking text, which is what's called an underspecified signal, and you're trying to add information to it that you think should be there to overspecify the signal. And that's really difficult to do. You need a lot of training data. You need a lot of context. People speak differently when they read versus when they talk conversationally. And so those are different kinds of voices that you got to consider. Do you want the machine to sound like it's reading to you, or do you want it to sound like it's actually talking, like Alexa or Siri? So this, in this case, a voice print would be learned separately. So you do the voice print stuff first, and then you take the voice print and you integrate it into a text-to-speech system to control what the output speaker is like. Now, if you don't do that, you'll end up with what we call an average voice, which is all the voices that you trained the AI on just sort of get averaged together, and maybe sometimes it sounds a little more like this person or a little more like that person. We use the voice print to control who it actually sounds like. And let me play this for you.
Let's hope it's an investment in the future.
So that sounds a little bit more machine-y. I'll play it again compared to the last few.
Let's hope it's an investment in the future.
So when I listen to that, I hear what I call artifacts. Those artifacts are things that make it sound like the phase is off, or again, like a machine, right? Now, this type of a deep fake is actually really easy to detect. I can detect it with my own ears usually. Maybe you can too, but also we can detect it with AI algorithms. So we can train a system that will detect, is this a synthetic speech or a real speech? And because there's so many artifacts, we actually do pretty good at it. So this type of attack, if we want to call it like a deepfake attack, is interesting because it gives the attacker more control over what is being said. But where the technology is for doing this kind of a deepfake, it's not very convincing all the time. So it's a little trade-off of, can you put words in someone's mouth, but then you can tell it's fake, right? And this is advancing rapidly, by the way. So maybe next year they will have done better at making it sound more natural. So what are some of the pros and cons of this technology? Raise your hand if you think there are pros to this technology, any benefits. A few people, quite a few people. Yeah? The Stephen Hawking case, exactly, yes, okay. And then, and what's that? Entertainment industry, absolutely, Hollywood, yeah, okay. And then there's some cons, I think, I don't know if I need to say, there's some obvious cons to deepfake, misinformation, and we'll go through some of those. So, benevolent uses for these applications. So, voice reconstruction after disability. So you can take little pieces of a person's voice, they can utter words or non-words, and you can capture just enough sound to recreate something like their voice that sounds a little bit like they used to. And Val Kilmer is a really recent and also famous example. You can create these things called screen readers. And if my video plays, I'll show you what that is. But a screen reader helps blind people or sight impaired people to use things like a computer and the internet, so they can browse and have the screen reader read out loud in a very special way the words and the context on the screen. So they could even fill in a form with their name and birth date and things like that because it's being read out loud to them. We can also do things like make audiobooks with special character voices, which can be fun for children. There's also voice interfaces. So if I want to talk hands-free to my vehicle or another object, I can do that via voice. It can recognize me, but it can also speak back to me as well. There's uses for this in call centers. I do not personally enjoy speaking to any automated system when I call customer service, but some people don't mind. And there can be medical and social robots in the hospital or at home. And then we get into some of the security things like voice biometrics. So because the voice print is unique to you, or my voice print is unique to me, we could use that to replace something like a password. So this laptop right here uses a fingerprint to unlock it. I don't mind it. It works enough that I don't get frustrated, and I just put my finger on it and it unlocks and I don't have to type. But imagine if I just said unlock and it unlocked. Maybe that's convenient. If I had my hands full, maybe if I've got small children or something, it might be really nice to open the car door or open the pod bay doors or something with my voice. And then we have kind of a newer technology, so audio scenes. This can be really helpful for, again, sight impaired people, with hearing impaired people who might want to know what is happening in their environment, even though they can't hear what's happening. So they want to go out and about around town and would like to know that there is a siren. And it'd be nice if something could listen for them, either ears, and then alert them to various activities that are happening in their environment, and that's scenes, audio scenes. Let's see if this video will play. Maybe it will. There should be sound in just a second.
We all have the capacity to be creative. We're all driven to share our deepest dreams and ideas with the world. When we think of the most talented creative people, they speak to us in a unique way. A phrase we often hear is having a creative voice. But I was struck by throat cancer. After getting treated, my voice as I knew it was taken away from me. People around me struggle to understand me when I'm talking. But despite all that, I still feel I'm the exact same person. Still the same creative soul. The soul that dreams ideas and stories constantly. But now I can express myself again. I can bring these dreams to you. and show you this part of myself once more. A part that was never truly gone, just hiding away.
So that's pretty cool. That's Val Kilmer. So Scientifique, the company who made Val Kilmer's voice, was a startup in London. It was purchased by Spotify, the company Spotify. And more interestingly to me, one of my colleagues at the University of Edinburgh, we did our PhDs together, she worked on Val Kilmer's voice and this recreation of voice reconstruction, text-to-speech with this particular company. So that's exciting. What about screen readers for the blind? Again, let's see if this video will cooperate.
I am not able to see what's on the screen. I'm holding it in front of my face right here like I can see it, but I can't. When I unlock the screen here and turn on my speech, I can touch the screen, and instead of activating something that I touch with my finger, it will read it to me and tell me what it is. And if I want to activate it, I touch the screen twice quickly to activate it. And that means that I need to explore the screen with my finger, or there's another command I can use called the swipe right and the swipe left. And that's it. Very similar to using the tab or shift tab keys on a desktop.
Phone number.
MM. Okay, that's probably a month. That's probably a day. Yai, which usually means multiple Ys. I'm going to see if I can figure out how many Ys.
Misspelled words. Edit. Roll table. Deep form controls. Links. Headings. Containers. Language.
I'm using the rotor
Punctuation. Sum. Speaking rate. 80.
to go to
Words. Characters.
characters.
Tap Y. Tap Y. Tap Y. Tap Y.
Okay, 4 Ys. Because again, there's only so much you can control about how the screen reader pronounces Y, but you can certainly label these fields. I'm experiencing, as an assistive technology user, your website differently than a visual person would, but they're part of the same code base. It's the same website. When you invest in accessibility, you're going to find a lot of things with your website that you didn't even know were issues for everybody.
So with screen readers, you probably heard it sounded a little funny compared to what we would call speech. And the reason for that is because when sight-impaired people become accustomed to their assistive device, they process that information really fast, and they don't need it to speak slow like I speak slow. So that's why it goes fast. There's a lot of research on exactly how fast that should be, by the way. So what are some nefarious synthetic voice applications? Well, some of the obvious ones. We could use this to impersonate people, splicing fake audio with real audio. And I have a very controversial example of that I am not going to talk about with you guys, because I did it in a talk in November, and I was told I did it respectfully, but I would rather just discuss it offline. But let me know if you'd like to hear it. So people can use synthetic voice to gain access to banking over the phone, spread misinformation. There's an upcoming election. I'm a foreigner, so I will not be participating in that, but I am equally concerned about this as the Electoral Commission, and am talking to the Electoral Commission about what could possibly be done about this. Criminals can exploit the public's lack of understanding of audio. Now, I don't think this is really fair, because how much do you really need to know scientifically and from a signal processing perspective? How much are you expected to know? Do we all need to become experts now in signal processing just to know if something is real? I don't think that's really fair, but criminals will exploit that, and that's a problem, just in the same way that they exploit spam on email, which I fall for spam sometimes, just like everyone else. So that's an exploitation. There's also this issue of I'm including myself, I don't know about you guys, but my voice data is everywhere. Yeah, it's all over the internet. Every time I give a talk and it goes on YouTube or podcast, or if someone's just recording me in the audience, right, and then they have it on their phone, and how can any of those databases be protected? Even legitimate ones like a call center. If I call my my power company and they record the calls for quality assurance, now that's in a database. What if an adversary wanted to get that database, and now they have everyone's not only information but their voice, right? Text-to-speech in particular is a tricky one. So the text-to-speech that we listened to was not a very great quality, but it still has this capability of putting words in people's mouths that they didn't say. And ultimately, sorry for the doom and gloom, but this could be used to upend democracy if people end up trusting information, especially important information, like say government communications or something, that is in fact fake. So this is a real problem. Where are we at with impersonation? Now again, let's see if this video plays. This is Morgan Freeman. Well, this is not Morgan Freeman.
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real. Well, in temporary terms, it is not. What if I were to tell you that I am not even a human being? Would you believe me? What is your perception of reality? Is it the ability to capture, process, and make sense of the information our senses receive? If you can see, hear, taste, or smell something, does that make it real? Or is it simply the ability to feel? I would like to welcome you to the era of synthetic reality. Now, what do you see?
Like I said before, if any recording of me ever comes out and they said Jennifer Williams said this and she said that, it's fake. I promise you, it's fake. I didn't do it. That's my defense. So summarizing this, so we talked about a lot of things. We talked about some of the science. So speech is this longitudinal wave that's these air patterns that we interpret with our ears. Voice prints can be created with just a few seconds of our speech. There are multiple different kinds of audio deepfakes. We talked about replay, this liveness bit. We talked about converting voices from one person's identity to another. And we talked about text-to-speech, where we generate speech from words. Yeah, so I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the projects I work on right now. I have a couple that are not on here. But that's okay. Just to give you an idea of what we're doing at the University of Southampton. So Professor Sebstein is a Turing AI Acceleration Fellow with the Turing Institute. And within his fellowship, this is how I got to Southampton. I was hired as a postdoc on his fellowship. And we looked at how would we theoretically make audio AI safe to be used in smart buildings, because in smart buildings, people are concerned about surveillance, right? If you walk into a building and it's smart, maybe it's listening to you, maybe it's tracking you. Now these are problems. So if we wanted to provide accessibility services or convenience using audio, what would be done in order to protect people's privacy? And so we looked at that. We also looked at how audio could be used combined with other AI techniques in order to do things like energy management. So if we could detect automatically how many people are in this room, say after the talk when it gets a little loud, maybe when people are moving around, we want to turn down the heating just a little bit because we'll get too warm, or turn it up if it feels a little empty and we're not moving about. So what I looked at was this thing called occupancy detection from audio and counting the number of people in a room. And I'll give you a sense of what that sounds like when there's multiple people speaking at the same time. So here are two speakers speaking at exactly the same time. Oops, that's not it.
After a little, he said,
Okay, so if you listen very carefully and play that over and over, you could probably hear some of the words and maybe even figure out who that is. If it's a bigger room with more people, it sounds like this. It's kind of a murmur, and the more people you add to this theoretical room speaking at the same time, the more it sounds like you're at a big event or a museum or something. So we want to look at how can we count the number of speakers in that audio while doing this other thing, which is adding these privacy mechanisms so that we can't actually identify the individuals with their voice print, and we cannot understand the words that they say. And I looked at two techniques that basically chop up the speech signal, rearrange it, and make it impossible, or more difficult, I should say. It's not impossible, it's more difficult to identify the individuals and hear their words. So here's what that sounds like. Okay, and here's another one. So this involves perturbations in the signal, so I slice it up, and then according to my algorithm, some bits I actually reverse them in the time domain, so they're speaking backwards, and then I shuffle them around and do things like that, so it makes it harder to detect information in that signal. Another project, I have a PhD student working on this now, is creating augmented reality soundscape experiences, and this ties into this audio scene analysis that I mentioned earlier, where a person who is hard of hearing may want some help identifying what's actually going on around them, because sometimes it's harder to see. So for example, there's a conversation. People in London outside the Underground are having a conversation. There's some traffic noise. Maybe there's some birds chirping in the trees. That'd be nice. Airplanes flying overhead. So these soundscapes are sounds that contribute to a person's oral experience, and they are extremely complex. So with an image, like I'm showing, this isn't a true rendering of a soundscape because it's an image, right? And in this image, I could, in most cases, draw a box or an outline around each of the objects in the image because they're spatially separated. With a soundscape, all that information, the planes, the birds chirping, the conversations, the traffic, all that information is entangled into one signal, and that's all I have. And I may or may not know the ground truth of what's in that signal to begin with, to go find it. So this is a really complex problem. It has a very wide range of applications, as you might imagine. And one of them that my PhD student is interested in is looking at how to enhance or suppress certain noises in that environment. So he usually uses this example of if he's out for a walk, maybe he wants to turn down the traffic and turn up the birds chirping, something like that, just to relax a little, that would be nice. And this is another project that is, for the most part, wrapped up. This is a project I lead with a very interdisciplinary team of legal scholars, human-computer interaction experts, who else? Industry partners, so Spotify, the folks who bought the company that made Val Kilmer's voice, Bose Corporation, they make little earbuds and also headphones, is what they're known for, Amazon, and Papercup. Papercup is a speech-to-speech translation company that contracts for people like the BBC, who want to make the programs available in other languages. So yeah, we got together and we looked at some really important questions that we could ask the public about how they trust certain existing, emerging, and totally hypothetical audio technologies. And we're almost done in analyzing that survey. We started in August 2022. We came up with 270 questions. It's a very long survey. 270 questions, all kinds of different scenarios. Like imagine imagine you have a relative who requires assistive care, would you trust a robot to remind them to take a medicine? All kinds of things like that. If there's a toy, a doll that can speak and you want to give it to your child and it says incorrect information, like the Eiffel Tower is located in London, who do you think is responsible for that? Is it the parent? Is it the company? Would you still use it if that happened? So those kinds of questions. Yeah, so we're analyzing that. We hope to have a publication on that. Well, we're going to have one on Monday, but it's been delayed, so it'll be, this year. What else do I have here? Oh, right. So this is a slide that I show, I like to show students because I think, and we talked about this before the talk, a few of us, the world is changing really fast. And when we have folks coming through the education system, they need to memorize things, they have to learn facts and historical theorems and algorithms and all that. But really what we need to start looking at is these real world solutions and this feedback loop that especially PhD students and people doing research really need to consider is that we live in different spaces. So as a PhD student, we live in this space of prototyping where we try to invent something like a technique and we test it in our little data set, our toy data set, to see if it works, and it does, and we get good results, and we're done. That's how PhD student stuff works. And that's the prototyping phase. Now, if it works really, really well, then maybe a product could be created out of that, and that's commercialization. But what really matters, honestly, are the users and the analysis of how the users interact with it. And in order for something to actually be valuable as a technology, especially in this field, in my discipline, it needs to be fair, inclusive, have few vulnerabilities. Those vulnerabilities need to be understood, and it needs to meet user needs in a safe manner. So I push for this as hard as I can. So an example is coming out with edge computing. So I didn't mention in my intro talk, I say used to, sort of currently, but used to, I resigned from a company just recently. So I've been working as a full-time professor at assistant professor at Southampton, and then also additionally part-time in industry with a startup in London. And I resigned from that in December, so I'm just in my notice period. But that company in industry is looking at putting certain speech technologies on edge devices. So what are edge devices? Edge devices are not connected to the internet, they're not connected to the web, they don't transmit data to the cloud or talk to other computers, they're isolated, and these are enabled by really, really, really small microchips that are extremely powerful. And when I say small, I'm talking about, in this example, we're looking at it's a US example, a penny, which is about the size of a 5-cent piece, and there's a little microchip on there. So it's like smaller than the tip of my pinky finger, and that can recognize, that's enough to recognize speech, at least a few words, maybe not all of my speech and get it correct, but the devices are getting smaller. The AI algorithms that go on those devices are getting more accurate and doing really interesting things. So anyway, it's important to keep the real world context in mind, even though some of these algorithms are fun and exciting, and it's cool to get good results. It's really important to keep this all in context. So some final thoughts. I don't know if we have time for a lot of discussion, but I'm happy to stick around, and with this size audience, I know there's going to be a lot of questions. So I just have questions for you. How do we quantify things like voice mixtures? So this has some legal implications for deepfakes, voice reconstruction, and the creative industries, so anyone working in, say, entertainment. This is where we want to protect individuals, but in order to do that, we want to mix other people's voices and create this thing called like an average voice. So how would we protect that kind of intellectual property in a legal way? How could you prove or claim that a deepfake of your voice had been created? So how would you prove that you never said something and that recording of you saying it, like I did the crime, that's fake. What are the lines between these malicious deepfakes and creative and artistic expression? So what about free speech? What about the right to satire in the same way that someone might create a mildly offensive cartoon or a comedian offending folks? Where is a creative line in that space? And ultimately, should deepfakes be regulated in this country? So those are my questions for you. I think that's all I have, yeah. So, thanks.